A black homeless teen risks his life to save a millionaire's dog, only to face racism. What happens when the truth comes out will leave you speechless. The sun was barely peeking through the thick clouds that hung low over the city streets. 17-year-old Marcus Johnson sat on the cold, cracked bench of a small park, clutching a tattered backpack that held everything he owned. His hands, rough from weeks of exposure to the bitter winds, shook slightly as he unwrapped the last granola bar he had saved. This wasn't the life Marcus had imagined. Just a year ago, he had dreams of graduating high school, getting a scholarship, and making his mother proud. But life had a cruel way of pulling the rug out from under you. After losing his mother to an unexpected illness and being shuffled between uncaring foster homes, Marcus had chosen the streets over the suffocating system. The streets, though, were no sanctuary. They were a battlefield. Each night, Marcus had to find a safe corner to sleep, away from the judgmental eyes of passers-by or the dangerous groups that roamed the alleyways. And each morning, he'd wake up hoping today would be different, hoping someone would see him as more than just a homeless kid. Marcus tightened his jacket against the morning chill and started walking toward the busier part of the city. He had learned to keep his head down and avoid unnecessary attention, but today, his stomach gnawed at him, demanding he find something to eat. His mind wandered as he passed a row of pristine mansions, their towering gates and manicured lawns a stark contrast to the gritty world he inhabited. It was there, just outside one of those mansions, that he first saw the dog. A golden retriever, frantic and pacing near the busy road, its leash tangled in a street sign. Cars zipped by, horns blaring as the dog barked helplessly. Marcus froze, his instincts warring with his fear. He didn't belong in a place like this, and he knew it. The polished windows and luxury cars screamed wealth and privilege, worlds apart from the life he lived. People like him weren't welcome here, and he had experienced that truth firsthand. But then he saw the terror in the dog's eyes as it lunged toward the road, nearly getting hit by a passing car. Marcus couldn't just stand by. He ran toward the dog, his worn sneakers slapping against the pavement. "Hey, easy, boy," Marcus murmured, his voice calm despite his racing heart. The dog's leash was tangled tight, and its frantic movements made it worse. "Stop moving, okay?" "I'm trying to help you," Marcus whispered, crouching low to avoid spooking the animal. It took a few nerve-wracking minutes, but finally he freed the leash. The golden retriever licked his hand, its wagging tail a small sign of gratitude. Marcus gave a soft laugh, his first in weeks. "You're a friendly one, huh? Bet your owner's worried sick." Just as he was about to check for an ID tag, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "Hey, what are you doing with my dog?" Marcus looked up to see a middle-aged woman in an expensive coat storming toward him. Her face was twisted in a mix of fear and anger. He instinctively raised his hands, the leash still in his grip. "I was just—" Marcus started, but she didn't let him finish. "I know what you were doing. Trying to steal him, weren't you?" she accused, her voice rising as she grabbed the leash from his hand. Marcus staggered back, the weight of her words hitting him harder than any physical blow. "No, I wasn't. He was stuck. I was helping," he tried to explain, but her glare was ice cold. "Sure you were," she snapped, pulling her dog close. "People like you think you can just take whatever you want." Her words cut deeper than she realized. People like you. Marcus had heard it all before, on the streets, in the foster homes, in the wary looks strangers gave him. No one ever stopped to see him for who he really was. As the woman tugged the dog's leash and walked away, Marcus stood frozen. The golden retriever looked back at him, its eyes full of trust, but its owner didn't. For Marcus, it was another reminder of how the world saw him, not as a kid trying to survive, but as someone to fear, someone to blame. He didn't want to cry. He'd taught himself not to. But as he walked back toward the park, His chest ached with a familiar, hollow pain. Little did he know, this moment was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything, for him, for the woman, and for her beloved dog. Why was the dog loose in the first place? And how would this encounter lead Marcus to something he'd never dared to dream of? A family. Marcus didn't get far before he heard it, a sharp, panicked yelp echoing through the neighborhood. He stopped in his tracks, his heart sinking. That sound was unmistakable. It was the dog. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. The woman had made it clear she didn't trust him, and she'd probably think he was up to no good if he showed up again. But the yelp came again, louder this time, full of pain and fear. "I can't just ignore it," Marcus whispered to himself. He turned back and sprinted toward the sound, his feet pounding against the pavement. The scene he stumbled upon made his stomach drop. The golden retriever was trapped. Its leash had gotten caught in the undercarriage of a sleek black sports car that had stopped near the edge of the road. The driver, a man in a tailored suit, was arguing with the dog's owner, his arms flailing in frustration. "I told you to control your dog," the man yelled, glaring at the woman. "It's not my fault," she shot back, her voice shaking. "He bolted before I could stop him." Meanwhile, the dog was writhing on the ground, its leg twisted at an odd angle. It was clear the poor animal was in pain, and the longer they argued, the worse the situation became. Without thinking, Marcus rushed forward. "Hey! Stop yelling and help me get him out!" The woman turned, her eyes narrowing as she recognized him. "You again? I told you to stay away." "I don't care what you told me," Marcus snapped, his voice firm for the first time. "If you don't help, your dog's going to get hurt even worse." The driver raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed, but begrudgingly stepped back. "Fine, kid. Do what you gotta do." Marcus knelt beside the dog, speaking softly as he assessed the situation. "It's okay, buddy. I've got you." He carefully slid under the car, using the small knife he carried in his backpack to cut the leash free. Every move was calculated, every second nerve-wracking as he tried not to hurt the dog further. Finally, with one last tug, the leash came loose. Marcus gently pulled the dog out, cradling it in his arms. The retriever whimpered, its tail wagging weakly as if to say, "Thank you." "He's hurt bad," Marcus said, looking up at the woman. "You need to get him to a vet. Now." The woman hesitated, her anger momentarily replaced by uncertainty. I don't have my car with me," she admitted. The driver scoffed. "Unbelievable. Fine, I'll drive you." He gestured toward his car, but then glanced at Marcus. "And you, are you coming or what? You're the only one who seems to know what you're doing." Marcus blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected to be included, but he wasn't about to say no. "Yeah, I'll come." The ride to the vet was tense. The woman sat in the back, clutching her dog, while Marcus gave instructions on how to hold it to avoid causing more pain. The driver remained silent, clearly irritated, but he didn't complain. When they arrived, the vet staff rushed the dog into an exam room. The woman tried to follow, but the receptionist stopped her. "We'll take it from here. Please wait in the lobby." As they sat in the waiting area, the woman kept stealing glances at Marcus. He could feel her eyes on him, filled with confusion, maybe even guilt. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you come back?" she asked, her voice quieter now, almost unsure. Marcus shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Because he needed help. It didn't matter what you thought of me." Her lips parted, as if to respond, but no words came out. She looked away, her face a mixture of emotions she wasn't ready to confront. After what felt like hours, the vet returned with a relieved smile. "He's going to be okay," she said. "A minor fracture, but nothing we can't fix. He'll need rest and some medication, but he'll make a full recovery." The woman exhaled sharply, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her purse tightly. She looked at Marcus again, her expression softer now. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I misjudged you. You saved him, and I didn't even give you a chance." Marcus shrugged again, but this time his voice carried a trace of the pain he'd been holding back. "It's nothing new. People like me, we're used to it." The weight of his words hung in the air, and the woman's guilt deepened. Before she could say anything more, the receptionist called her over to finalize the paperwork. As Marcus watched her leave, he thought it was the end of their strange encounter. But little did he know, his act of kindness had set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. A week had passed since Marcus saved the dog, and life on the streets continued as usual. Every morning he woke up to the same cold bench and the same gnawing hunger. He tried to push the memory of the incident out of his mind. After all, what were the chances he'd ever see the woman or her dog again? But fate had other plans. One rainy afternoon, Marcus sat under a bus stop shelter trying to stay dry. He was flipping through a worn book he'd found in a donation bin when the sound of a car engine drew his attention. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Marcus froze, his heartbeat quickening as the window rolled down, revealing the same woman from that day. "Marcus, right?" she called out, her voice hesitant but clear. Marcus narrowed his eyes, unsure of her intentions. "Yeah, what do you want?" She stepped out of the car, holding an umbrella over her head. In her hand was a small bag that she clutched nervously. I wanted to thank you. Properly this time." She approached him, holding out the bag. "I brought you some food, and I wanted to apologize again. I was wrong to judge you the way I did. You were nothing but kind, and I repaid that kindness with suspicion and cruelty." Marcus hesitated, his pride warring with his need. He didn't want to take her pity, but the smell of fresh food wafting from the bag was impossible to ignore. "Thanks," he mumbled, taking it cautiously. As he opened the bag, he found a sandwich, a bottle of water, and a small first aid kit. It wasn't much, but it was more than anyone had offered him in weeks. "I wasn't expecting to see you again," Marcus admitted, his tone guarded. The woman gave a small, awkward smile. "I wasn't expecting to come looking for you, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "That day you showed me something I hadn't seen in a long time, selflessness. You didn't hesitate to help, even after how I treated you." Marcus shrugged. The dog needed help. That's all that mattered. Her smile faltered, her guilt still apparent. "You're a better person than most people I know," she said softly. She glanced back at her car, where the golden retriever was sitting in the back seat, its tail wagging as it recognized Marcus. "Buddy's been doing great thanks to you," she said. "The vet says he'll make a full recovery. I don't know what I would have done without you." Marcus gave a small smile, his guard dropping slightly. "He's a good dog. I'm glad he's okay." For a moment, there was silence between them, just the sound of rain tapping against the umbrella. Then the woman spoke again. "Do you have a place to stay?" Marcus stiffened, his defenses going up immediately. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." Her eyes softened. "You don't have to be so tough all the time, you know. It's okay to accept help." Marcus shook his head, stepping back. "I've been on my own for a while. I'm used to it." The woman sighed, clearly unsure of how to break through his walls. "Well, if you ever need anything, here." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "I don't want to push you, but if you need help, or even just a hot meal, call me." Marcus reluctantly took the card, his fingers brushing against the embossed letters. Rachel Montgomery. Beneath her name was an address and a phone number. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" She hesitated, then said quietly, Because you remind me of someone I used to know, someone I couldn't help. I don't want to make the same mistake again." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. Before Marcus could respond, she gave him a small nod and walked back to her car. The golden retriever barked happily as she climbed in, and moments later, the SUV disappeared into the rain. For the next few days, Marcus carried Rachel's card in his pocket, constantly debating whether to call. He didn't trust easily. How could he, after everything he'd been through? But something about Rachel's words stuck with him. One evening, as he sat on the bench watching the sun dip below the horizon, he pulled out the card again. His stomach growled, and the idea of a hot meal was tempting. But more than that, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was his chance for something better. With a deep breath, he stood up and started walking toward the address on the card, not knowing what to expect, but willing to take a leap of faith. What will Marcus find when he takes Rachel up on her offer? And how will this unexpected connection lead to a life-changing revelation? The house at the address on Rachel's card was far from what Marcus expected. It wasn't a towering mansion like the one he had seen before, but a cozy two-story home nestled on a quiet street. The warm glow from the windows spilled out into the cool evening air, and the soft hum of voices and laughter reached Marcus's ears as he hesitated at the edge of the driveway. His fingers tightened around the card in his pocket. What if this is a mistake? The doubts swirled in his mind. He had been let down too many times to believe in charity or kindness without a catch. But then he thought of the golden retriever, Buddy, and the way Rachel had looked at him that day in the rain. There had been something real in her eyes, something more than pity. Taking a deep breath, Marcus forced his feet forward and knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately, and there stood Rachel, her face lighting up in surprise. "Marcus," she said, her voice warm but slightly cautious, as if afraid he might bolt at any second. "You came." "Yeah," Marcus muttered, looking down at his worn sneakers. "I figured. Maybe I'd see what you were talking about." Rachel stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Come in. It's freezing out there." Marcus hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The smell of something delicious hit him instantly. Garlic and herbs, with a hint of something baking. The house was inviting, with soft furniture, family photos lining the walls, and Buddy sprawled lazily on a rug by the fireplace. The dog's ears perked up when he saw Marcus, and his tail wagged furiously as he trotted over to greet him. "Hey boy," Marcus said softly, kneeling to scratch Buddy behind the ears. The retriever licked his hand, and Marcus couldn't help but smile. "Dinner's almost ready," Rachel said, motioning toward the dining table, which was set with mismatched but charming plates and silverware. "You're just in time." Marcus stood awkwardly, unsure of where to go or what to do. Rachel seemed to sense his unease. "Make yourself at home," she said gently. "You've had a rough time, haven't you?" Marcus glanced at her, his guard still partially up. "You could say that." She nodded, not pushing him to say more. Instead, she disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Marcus to take in the space. The house was filled with small signs of life. A child's drawing taped to the fridge, a stack of board games on a shelf, and a pair of rain boots by the door. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Dinner was simple but filling: spaghetti, fresh bread, and a salad that Marcus attacked with quiet intensity. Rachel didn't pry or bombard him with questions as they ate. Instead, she shared small stories about Buddy, her work as a graphic designer, and her love for fostering rescue dogs. Slowly, Marcus began to relax, though he still chose his words carefully. After dinner, Rachel cleared the plates and brought out 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She sat across from Marcus, studying him for a moment before speaking. "I know you probably don't trust me," she said gently. "And I get it. The world hasn't exactly been kind to you. Marcus's grip on the mug tightened, but he didn't respond. "I used to know someone like you," Rachel continued, her voice growing softer. "My brother, Caleb. He was kind, just like you, but he fell on hard times, and I couldn't save him. He needed someone to believe in him, but no one did. Not even me when it mattered most." Marcus looked up at her, startled by the vulnerability in her voice. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me," Rachel said, her eyes locking onto his. "I'm telling you because I don't want to make that mistake again. You've been dealt a bad hand. But I see something in you, Marcus. You deserve a chance, just like anyone else." For the first time in what felt like forever, Marcus felt the tight knot in his chest begin to loosen. He wanted to believe her words, even if a part of him still held back. "So, what are you saying?" he asked cautiously. "I'm saying you don't have to do this alone anymore," Rachel said firmly. "If you're willing, I'd like to help you get back on your feet. A place to stay, food, clothes, whatever you need." Marcus stared at her, his mind spinning. This was the kind of offer he had dreamed of but never dared to expect. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because everyone deserves a family," Rachel said simply. Marcus didn't respond right away. His whole life had been about survival, about trusting no one but himself. But as he looked around the warm, inviting home and saw Buddy wagging his tail at his feet, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, Rachel was telling the truth. "Okay," Marcus said finally, his voice trembling slightly. "I'll stay. For now." Rachel smiled, her eyes shining with relief. "That's all I ask." As Marcus begins to settle into his new life, old wounds and new challenges threaten to unravel his fragile trust. Will he finally find the family he's been longing for? Or will the weight of his past pull him back into the darkness? One evening, as Rachel prepared dinner, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, tinkering with an old radio he'd found in the garage. Buddy lay at his feet, his tail thumping rhythmically against the floor. "You're pretty good at that," Rachel said, nodding toward the radio as she stirred a pot on the stove. Marcus shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "My mom taught me. She used to fix things around the house all the time. Said there was no point in throwing something out if you could fix it." Rachel paused, her expression softening. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was," Marcus said quietly, his fingers stilling on the wires. I wish I'd had more time with her." Rachel walked over and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "She'd be proud of you, Marcus. I know I am." Her words caught him off guard, and he blinked quickly, looking away. "Thanks," he muttered, his voice thick. That night, as Marcus lay in the cozy guest room Rachel had set up for him, he stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. It had been so long since anyone had believed in him. Rachel's kindness felt almost too good to be true, but he couldn't deny the warmth it brought to his heart. Yet a part of him still struggled to let go of the fear and mistrust that had kept him alive on the streets. He couldn't help but wonder, what if this doesn't last? What if I mess it up? The next morning, Rachel knocked on his door. "Hey Marcus," she said, her voice cheerful. "I was thinking we could go somewhere special today." "Where?" Marcus asked, his curiosity piqued. "You'll see," Rachel said with a smile. She drove them to a community center on the other side of town, where a group of people was gathered in a workshop filled with tools, machines, and materials. Marcus's eyes widened as he took in the sight of volunteers teaching kids how to build and repair things, from bikes to computers. "I thought you might like this," Rachel said as they walked inside. "It's a program that helps kids learn skills they can use in the real world. I figured you'd fit right in." Marcus hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "You really think I can do this?" Rachel smiled. "I know you can." The hours flew by as Marcus immersed himself in the workshop. He worked alongside other teens, his hands deftly assembling parts, and his mind coming alive with ideas. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. At the end of the day, the program director pulled Rachel aside. "He's got a natural talent," she said. "If he's interested, we'd love to have him join our apprenticeship program. It could lead to something big." Rachel beamed. "I'll talk to him about it. Thank you." On the drive home, Marcus stared out the window, his thoughts swirling. He had spent so much of his life feeling invisible, but today he felt seen. "Rachel," he said suddenly, breaking the silence, "why are you doing all this for me?" She glanced at him, her eyes soft. "Because everyone deserves a chance, Marcus, and because I see someone who's worth believing in." Her words struck a chord deep within him, and for the first time, Marcus allowed himself to believe it might be true. Over the following months, Marcus thrived in the apprenticeship program. He worked hard, impressing his mentors with his determination and creativity. Rachel was there every step of the way, cheering him on and reminding him that he wasn't alone anymore. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Buddy curled up at their feet, Marcus turned to Rachel. "You know," he said, his voice steady, "I think I finally understand what you meant when you said everyone deserves a family." Rachel smiled, her eyes misty. "And you'll always have one here, Marcus, no matter what." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He had risked everything to save a dog, and in doing so, had found not just a new home, but a family that believed in him. A family that showed him he was worthy of love and a future brighter than he'd ever imagined. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the most profound changes. For Marcus, saving Buddy had been a simple choice, but that choice had set off a chain of events that changed his life forever, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for redemption, connection, and a new beginning.